Hello, and welcome back to another video. I'm Josh. Greetings on this changing of the seasons evening, the winter solstice, almost Christmas time in the Western calendar. And yeah, I just thought I'd want to make a video about this and just talk about how it ties in a little bit with the changing of my own beliefs and the changing times that we now live in. And just dive a little bit deeper into Christmas and what it means and why so many cultures have celebrations around the winter time. Yeah, so without further ado, onto the first picture I wanted to show. So this is, a classic kind of image of Santa that, if you've grown up in the Western world or consumed Western media, I'm sure you'll be familiar with the figure of Santa, this kind of guy with a white beard and dressed in red, sometimes green, uh, on a sled pulled by reindeers who comes to give you gifts. And you've also got here some mushrooms, which are often associated with Christmas, the Christmas colours being kind of this red and white combo most frequently. Also, green can feature in elves, things like that too. And Santa, the kind of myth, is that he's from somewhere north, the North Pole, and this all with the kind of aesthetic of snow. Of course, it being winter and it being a festive icon, Santa. Now, for anyone that might have done a little bit of research on this, of course, the common kind of explanation of the origin of Santa might be either commercially or potentially St. Nicholas, who was a saint in the Catholic Church. But there are those who have argued that actually the origins of Santa go back much further, beyond Christendom, and in fact that even Christmas itself as a festival, there are people who've argued that we should investigate the more what would be termed pagan in relation to Christianity beliefs around this festival and this time of year to kind of understand how it was syncretized by the Catholic Church and other institutions like them to create the kind of modern calendars that we now have, considering that the modern calendar we now have was only made by the Pope or officially declared by the Pope, Pope Gregory. Can't remember when, but not that long ago. And before that, we were just on the Julian calendar declared by Rome, both of which I believe are solar calendars. So mostly orientate themselves around the sun rather than the moon as the primary kind of cycle which is being lived in tune with. So that's something straight away which for me is fascinating, thinking about the calendars and the way that the year is structured and the way that shapes our lives, and how in touch we are with the seasons in different places in the world. And yeah, so they haven't always had a solar calendar. In fact, in the time of Christ, Jews would have used a more lunar calendar, or one that incorporated aspects of both, for the feasts that Jews marked throughout the year, such as Hanukkah, as I mentioned previously, or Feast of Trumpets, which I'll discuss shortly. But so to go back to Santa, so there's this kind of concept that perhaps there's some origin that which is before Christianity, which could there be some kind of pre-existing myth before Christ was born for this time period? What were the stories that were told by the Druids, by the Germanic peoples, by the ancient Egyptians, by people in India, everywhere in the world? What kind of stories were told? And well, specifically in the context of Europe, let's go to the next picture. This is a picture of a people known as the Sami, I believe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so they live in like Norway, Sweden, very, very northern. Uh, and they have a lot of kind of shared heritage with the Germanic kind of peoples, um, and this kind of Norse mythology. But uh, specifically, the Sami, they were mostly nomadic peoples, I believe. Here we've got just a picture of a family in kind of modern times wearing this very colourful kind of outfits because basically, as I understand it, these peoples tend to migrate, and that's how they come into contact with the reindeer. The reindeer are the this is where they kind of come into Christmas, and this the whole North Pole concept comes in. I think because ultimately it derives from these people who are living alongside the reindeer and who have had the experience of reindeers pulling sleighs in order for this image of Santa to be born. So, yeah, here we've just got a picture of a family kind of being pulled by a reindeer, but it might fascinate you to know that there's a little twist in the tale, and that's well, there's something strange that reindeer do. Obviously, they have a very different physiology to humans, and the way their body works is very different. But so one thing they could do, which we couldn't do, is they in the winter when there's not much vegetation, they will often dig in the snow looking for fungi or moss or things like that to eat to sustain them. And actually, in fact, in this region of the world, even in wintertime, there, or maybe only in wintertime, I'm not sure. Um, we need this when we need to talk to a mycologist, but there's these red and white mushrooms, and it's called Amanita muscaria, I believe, and it's the one which is in on the emoji keyboard, so most people are familiar with it. And as I said, it's often featured in kind of Christmas iconography as well. And basically, these reindeer they eat these fungi, and these fungi normally, if humans would ingest them, they might well die if they don't, undergo some process before someone were to consume them, because they contain a range of chemicals which do a host of crazy things to the body. You don't always die, and in fact, basically, there's this myth, or what people call as a myth, people say is a myth, but I mean, like any good myth, I think there's truth at the core of it, and there are many people who attest to the truth of this practice where the Sami peoples, they will drink the urine of these reindeer after they've consumed the Amanita muscaria mushrooms, and then that after it's been through the reindeer, it's actually filtered the toxins, but the chemical which can make people trip and have a hallucinogenic experience, that is still present in the urine. So people drink this urine uh, and have this mystical experience, as many indigenous cultures do around the world, especially more nomadic ones who live with the land alongside a particular species, as the Sami do, or at least did. I'm not sure, exactly what the kind of current state of affairs is in this region, but I imagine a lot of people will have, as industrializations happened, moved into more permanent residences, and generally, I think there's less nomadic people in the world. But yeah, I think it's just fascinating to think about the way in which uh, Santa might originally have not been a man as well, before St. Nick starts getting kind of incorporated into it by the Catholic Church as they're formalizing their kind of myths and which aspects of pre-existing mythology they want to incorporate into their lexicon of how we should worship and interact with God. Uh, and thinking about what did they leave out? What's the hidden aspects of this? uh, of these myths, what has been lost from these ancient tales, as all traditions of these cultures has have died out, and as the languages kind of been funneled into this thing where now English is the global, uh, the or something like Mandarin. You have these, languages which are spoken all over the world, internationally. And sadly, we're getting this kind of dying off of all these, more niche dialects. Although thankfully, of course, there is some translation and now preservation which can occur through technology too. So yeah, it's a crazy time to be alive, but we still have knowledge of where these things come from, even if it's not in popular consciousness. We still have these kind of symbols like the mushroom, the red and white mushroom. We might not know what it is, and no one might have ever seen it or consumed it in the modern age, or the majority of people won't have. But I think there's a growing awareness of these kind of substances which have been criminalized in the last 100 years or so, which before that were used pretty widely in a rural setting, especially in just kind of folk remedies and practices, rituals, and yeah, I think we're seeing a resurgence of that. And in the modern age too, the most frequent, most widely known symbol perhaps of Christmas might be the Christmas tree. And again, of course, the tree has such a powerful significance in relation to nature, to everyone, to every human being. It's somewhere in there in our mind uh, that we're all descended from people who lived in trees and with trees and alongside trees for thousands and thousands of years. And yeah, I mean, here we just got a picture of, I think it's Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who were kind of one of the couples who first popularized Christmas trees in the UK, because it's more of a European kind of Scandinavian tradition again, which kind of goes back to those pagan roots in a way in which didn't exist in England for quite a long time. And it's interesting kind of analyzing that dynamic. You could go into a whole thing about that in itself, but yeah, the tree is just such a powerful symbol, and of course, in mythology, it goes back to the tree of life and tree of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil in the garden, and in the Christian and Judaism story. And you've got the world tree, which kind of supports and encompasses reality in Norse mythology, and just the way it can be, this image, this icon can be used in metaphor is just, of course, so powerful. The image of a tree and how it's also using an evergreen as well as something which survives the winter, life which will come back and be reborn, and that's very much what this Christmas celebration is of, because it's a celebration that occurs at the kind of darkest time of the year, especially in European mythology, where you have more pronounced seasons in this way. Of course, because around the equator you don't have seasons in the same way in different environments, but in a European context, the winter is dark, and because of the tilt of the Earth, uh, and the way that the magnetic fields are, and just the orientation of everything, it means that we have this time when we have really short days, and then longer days in the summer. So in the short days, it's like the darkest kind of time, the shortest bit of light, and of course all the metaphors there as well. As humanity kind of goes through this hard time when you've got to find food and shelter and warmth become that much harder to achieve as things hibernate and there's less wildlife around and nature kind of shuts down, although of course there are always creatures there adapted to the cold too. So it's just a time when the face of the earth is transformed, and with that there's this kind of reflective process that seems to be in the human psyche, and people have celebrated rituals at wintertime for thousands of years, since the dawn of it all, really, as the kind of human body and mind reflects the changing seasons in this kind of astrological fashion. And of course, even in the kind of standard Christian canonical account of the birth of Christ, we have the star which leads the wise men, the Magi, to Bethlehem, to the place where Jesus is born, so they can give him those gifts. And there's been no end of investigation and calculation made by astrologers and astronomers and a range of people to try and pin down the specific date of Christ's birth according to this kind of astrological sign. Most frequently, people say that it could be associated most likely with the astrological event described in Revelation, where the woman gives birth to a child in the stars. And in terms of the zodiac, you've got Virgo and Leo, which two different constellations. Virgo's like the maiden, also associated like the Virgin, like Mary, and the lion, like this kind of child, the sun, literally, because it involves the sun in that constellation. And during this astrological event where Virgo and Leo are there, you also have Jupiter and Venus, which to the ancient world they wouldn't have distinguished planets from stars in the same way, because they just saw them as all astrological objects. They were just things which were bright in the sky. Of course, they hadn't, gone to their, they hadn't, sent probes there and things like that, so they didn't know the distinction. So you have this kind of Jupiter being the, of course, in Greek mythology, it's associated with basically Zeus in Greek mythology. The equivalent is Jupiter in Roman mythology, and Venus is just the mother, effectively. Again, associated with the feminine, associated with a whole list of feminine goddesses back to Babylonian times, who were the first kind of peoples to really map the stars and give us the zodiac as we currently have it, with all its symbols and divisions. So yeah, and people have calculated that as well at this time in 3 BC. So again, you have this kind of skewing that happens in the modern calendar, in the way in which Jesus probably wasn't born in December 25th. I mean, in fact, he almost definitely wasn't, because that's just something which was decided later by the Catholic Church as a result of their alterations to the calendar. But in the Gospels, it gives more description about the time when the context of the birth of Jesus, and it says they're going to Bethlehem because there's a census by Augustus during 3 BC. That would have been a time when this census could have occurred during the reign of Augustus as emperor of Rome, and also basically the kind of leading calculation I've seen is that basically there was this time when this astrological event's occurring where the father and mother, in terms of the zodiac, Jupiter and Venus, they come very, very close together. And then you also have the sun emerge from the constellation Virgo, as Leo and Virgo pass each other. So effectively, you have this kind of event which the stars in pre-existing Greek and Roman mythology and Babylonian, and something which every culture could relate to in the way in which different planets have been personified with either masculine or feminine kind of energies. Uh, this astrological event occurs also at the same time in 3 BC. You have uh, around August, a kind of autumn time, you have the start of the Jewish New Year, the Feast of Trumpets, and basically the what I would consider to be the kind of most likely date we have for the birth of Jesus would be this time in the autumn of 3 BC, and some people even say it could have been on 9/11, which is a you know just something I'll just throw out there to you. But it's something which I think there's just, you can see the disjoint between the kind of official narrative and the way in which it doesn't actually align with an astrological event as the actual text itself describes, with this astrological event that leads the Magi there. And there's not really this discussion about like how come the Bible says astrology is bad and you shouldn't mess with it, but then it's like there in the Christmas story in a way that kind of like validates Christ's divinity, that the stars themselves have kind of marked the birth of this being, and you have this astrological language used throughout, and Christ himself even takes upon him this title when he confers, he identifies himself with the morning star, with Venus, and in fact that literally means Lucifer. So the title Lucifer is one which Jesus claims for himself, and this is where it might become confusing to people, because people think that Lucifer is Satan and have this kind of very kind of simple but also kind of nonsensical understanding of the devil and Satan, I think, and kind of what the devil's role is, and the way that they see the darkness, and the way that they just kind of fear it. And just like you might fear astrology, rather than, there's aspects of the darkness that you should fear, but at the end of the day, I think you do truly, ultimately, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, in the sense that, like I said in the last video, like often it's plunge into the terror, it's worse, it's not as bad. It's not worse, it's not as bad as you'd expect, of course, not always, but I think that, I mean, you could argue, some could say, oh, in this story, it doesn't end well, though, as a result of the events. The Magi come, they tell King Herod where Jesus was born, in Bethlehem, and then King Herod kills all of the small children to try and kill Jesus, and then Jesus has to flee to Egypt. And someone could say, well, there you go, see, astrology messing with that. The kings, they brought death to all the children. And there's a fair point there, but then I think that, again, that's only one part of the picture. And to understand why bad things have to happen, you have to understand the full picture, and you don't know whether or not that happening in Bethlehem meant that other people didn't die in another place that Herod tried to kill Jesus at, or something could have happened in Egypt which had to happen, which isn't talked about in the Bible, because of course in the Gospels, and as we currently have them in Greek, we have a huge chunk of Jesus' life missing. The vast majority is just not talked about. The time, but until he's a man, till he's about 30, just before whenever he starts his ministry. But for good kind of solid 15-20 years of his life, we don't know what's happening. We know he fled to Egypt, but we don't know if he traveled anywhere else in the world. I mean, I'd love to make some videos on that at some point. There's all kinds of wild theories. But yeah, I think that, again, just with this astrology thing, like, you have to just be real and say that really it's fear that motivates people, I think, to kind of have this suspicion of like kind of this, something people often say is like, oh, Christmas has pagan origins, it's a pagan festival. The Catholic Church has like pagan influences. People are scared of that. People are worried about like, oh no, I don't want to, I don't want to offend God. I don't want to, because God is a jealous God, as it says in the Ten Commandments. It's like, and there's this wrath. There's this wrath. You don't want the wrath, and but I think that's fear. You shouldn't. And people. It's like the way again it's translated. It's like Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's like, what does that mean? What does that fear mean? Is it fear like you feel fear, or is it like reverence? And what is that? What is reverence? And what does is there a distinction? What does it mean? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. What does that mean? And of course, Lord there, the term really in Hebrew would be Yahweh, would be the name of God, the tetragrammaton. And it's like reverence of that name is the beginning of wisdom. And I mean, I should make a whole separate video on what the kind of name means and its potential association with breath and the way in which just the sound of it as well. But yeah, I think ultimately, even the Bible itself uses other names for God other than Yahweh. I mean, of course, the Jews tended towards this kind of formalization of things where they use titles like Adonai, which means Lord, and that's how you get it carried over into the English. It's just like Lord, Lord, which has this very patriarchal kind of aspect to it too. But you have other terms in the original kind of Hebrew Old Testament, like El Shaddai, and terms like that, which are really titles to describe kind of aspects of God, like King of Kings or Lord of Lords. And yeah, I think, I mean, it's interesting because those titles as well can be found in other religions, like contemporary to Judaism as it was developing. So, in Canaanite pantheon, for example, El is a deity, and I believe Yahweh too. So there's this kind of syncretization which occurs in the ancient world, but which the modern church has such a suspicion of, because it's almost like they feel like this is Christmas. Christmas means this. It's this story written in these three books. Because one of John's Gospel doesn't discuss the birth of Christ. It just begins with his ministry, with his baptism. Only the first three of the Gospels discuss the Nativity, unless you think that John, who wrote the Gospel, talked about it astrologically in Revelation, if you believe they're the same author, as I would think is likely, personally. So yeah, I think, well, people say, oh, this is just the official story is in these three books, but I think it's a lot deeper than that, and I think that the significance of the star really comes into its own when you realize it's this astrological event which everyone around the world would have like realized the significance of if they heard that it had occurred in this part of the world at this time on this Jewish feast at the start of the new year. That it's something which as well would be proof to Jews as well, which is principally who Jesus was uh, preaching and ministering to during his life until his death, kind of thing, during his first period of ministry. So yeah, I've just become a lot more open, I think, to these kind of ancient stories and thinking about how a way in which they don't have to conflict with the kind of stories that we have at the moment, just thinking about ways in which they actually can complement them and really just make it click into place. And again, with the stars mirroring what's happening with Mary giving birth to the Christ, and yeah, I mean, and realizing that there is this feminine element to it as well in the stars. It's Jupiter and Venus. It's you know, the spirit is very much present, and I think that that is really the key, which is missing from the modern story uh, in its current form officially in the canon. Is that there isn't this acknowledgement of the way in which winter is this kind of this time of darkness, and again the darkness, the chaos, is most frequently associated with femininity, and this way in which, from the darkest night, you know that's where then the new dawn is comes from. It's darkest before the dawn, kind of thing, and that's what the solstice is. It's the moment before then the new year begins. It's the moment then when a new chapter begins, and that's what the birth of Christ signified. It was a new chapter for humanity, a new consciousness, a new awakening to the truth, which Jesus lived with his life and preached with his words. Whether they're ones which are recorded in a book that the Catholic Church says is legit, or whether they weren't, or whether they're elsewhere, or whether they've been hidden away in the Vatican Library. I think it's all got to come out in the end. And Jesus himself says this. He says, I can't remember exactly where, but he says, all that is hidden will be revealed. And I do truly believe that. I think that that's really kind of what's happening, is we're getting this kind of flood of information that the internet provides you with, and this mass education of people, and the shattering of these narratives which have kind of shaped people's minds for millennia, as patriarchy is being questioned, and as we're reevaluating our relationship with nature, with the earth. It's just such an exciting time, and yeah, I think a lot is going to happen in 2024. It looks like, um, but I just pray that it'll be a time of renewal, and a time of light, and that there'd be more of an awakening of this past that's been hidden, of this amnesia that we have as a species, uh, of our traditions, of the things which keep us in tune with the stars, the planets, and the way in which we are a dancing kind of reflection of them, whether or not we're aware of it or not. But I think the more you're aware of it, the more that you accept it, the more that you face your fear, I think the more rewarding it is, and the more freedom and autonomy you really have. And that's kind of what this is all about. That's why it's all simulated. That's why suffering exists. That's why you were born. That's why we are the way we are. It's because that's just the way it has to be. There's no redemption without a fall, and it's got to be dark before it can be light again. And yeah, I just want to encourage anyone that's had a tough time in 2023, and that to just to just find a way to kind of let it go as the seasons change, as we reach this zenith of darkness, to just sit with it, whatever it is, and then just let it go as we enter into this new time. Um, and yeah, I just pray that the spirit of the reindeer would guide us, as the Sami people, I believe, have legends about, which you should definitely go and look up. And I'd encourage you to look more into this topic, and more into the rituals which exist around this time in cultures other than your own. And yeah, I just hope this is a really blessed time of reflection for us all, and I just pray that the spirit would continue to rise in us all, and yeah, that just more of the truth of what kind of Christ represents. I think I just pray that that would just really just shine through. Um, and yeah, I've just got this image of the prism, the kind of dispersion of light into a rainbow from white light, and yeah, I just hope that's what continues to happen. I can see it already, and I'm so grateful for it. And yeah, I just hope you all have a really blessed Mother's Night, and yeah, God bless, and hope to see you all in the new year. And please get in touch and share anything you would like, any thoughts or feelings you have. If you've made it this far, and yeah, I'd love to talk to you soon, and really appreciate all the love and support. And yeah, peace.